Hi everyone, it's Marisa from bumblebeeapothecary.com, and this video is going to be me talking about my thoughts on oxalates. So I love getting video requests from you guys, and not too long ago I did a video where I shared my thoughts on the carnivore diet, and that video was due to a request from you guys. And then soon after that video came out, I saw that there was interest in hearing my thoughts on oxalates. So today I'm going to talk about that. So just to be clear, I am not a medical doctor. All of the information that I am sharing today is my opinion, and it's all based on information that I learned from Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride as well as Mary Reddick, two of my very favorite people in the health space. And so just to be clear, all this information is just for educational purposes. You always want to make sure to talk to your trusted healthcare professional before you make any changes. Do your own research. And with that out of the way, let's jump in. So oxalates are one of those things in the health world where people who are having various struggles and symptoms and things that they're trying to figure out and overcome, it'll often crop up, and there's various ways of dealing with them. And first of all, if you don't know if you have an oxalate issue, then I would not even worry about it. In fact, I'm going to talk about Dr. Natasha's perspective on this in a second, but that fits with what she recommends. If you are not aware of a problem, don't go looking for one. So if you don't think that you have an issue with oxalates, don't even think about it. You can still, learn about it just for interesting information. But if you're one of those people who are like, do I have an oxalate issue and I don't know about it? Then no. So don't worry about it if you don't. But if you do know already that you have an oxalate issue, then hopefully you'll find this interesting. I know I did when I learned about it. So I personally haven't had an issue with oxalates myself, but as a certified GAPS coach, I do help people who have an issue with them. So I have experience that way. And then I also have my training from Dr. Natasha. And then, like I said, I've also learned about this from Mary Reddick as well. So I'm going to first talk about what Dr. Natasha has to say about oxalates and when people have issues with oxalates. So first of all, what are oxalates? There are various different things called plant toxins, and this is very interesting about plants in general. So plants don't really want to be eaten, just like anything or anybody else, and so they have things in them that help to protect them from being eaten, and one of those things is various types of plant toxins, and they're like self-preservation chemicals because the plant wants to be able to grow and mature and reproduce other plants and different things like that. And so these can look like different things. One of the very well-known ones is phytic acid. So this is found in grains and seeds and nuts and things like that. And it's one of those things that's hard for the body to digest. It makes it hard for the body to digest grains and seeds and things like that unless it's deactivated. That's why we do the different soaking and fermentation techniques and things like that before we eat those. So I'm just mentioning that one because it's a common example that a lot of people have heard of plant toxins. But there are other ones as well. So phytic acid, oxalates, saponins, lectins, and there's more too. But today we're just talking about oxalates. So oxalates, when they're analyzed, they are sharp. I heard it described as like sharp pieces of glass. And if people have issues with them and kidney issues and things like that, that'll sound familiar to you. So what do we do about oxalates if we think that we are having an issue with them? Or actually, let's first talk about why does the issue happen in the first place. And then again, just to be clear, this is not medical advice. This is just information based on what I have learned from Dr. Natasha and Mary Reddick. I'm not a medical doctor. Make sure to always run everything past your trusted healthcare provider before you do anything, and do your own research. So just to be very clear on that. So Dr. Natasha has such a nice view on this. If you're familiar with her at all, you'll know that she is a big proponent of fixing the underlying cause, which is very simple in most cases, and then so many things take care of themselves. So many times the underlying cause is an unhealthy gut, so leaky gut and an imbalance of the microbes that are supposed to be in the digestive system. And the main problem that she says happens when people have issues with oxalates is the leaky gut, and then also the inability to properly break down and digest foods. So here are her 2 books on the GAPS diet that she has written. Her first one, Gut and Psychology Syndrome, and the blue one, the newer one, Gut and Physiology Syndrome. In the yellow book, she has a whole explanation along with little cartoons and everything of how the digestive system is actually supposed to work, and then how, when various problems are present, that process doesn't happen, where it breaks down and how, and then what the results are. And so she says the main issue when people have a oxalate sensitivity or a problem with oxalates is leaky gut, as well as that imbalance of microbes to some degree too. And so she says that the way to fix the oxalate issue for good is to heal the gut. So sealing leaky gut, restoring that balance. Some foods that are high in oxalates are things like beets, beet greens, spinach is very high, other leafy greens like that, the thicker ones like kale, Swiss chard, things like that are very high in oxalates. Beets themselves can be as well, but especially the greens. Spinach is always the one that comes to mind for me. So Dr. Natasha is not a big proponent of avoiding a bunch of different things and cutting things out. That's not the way that she likes to start. Of course, that may be necessary in some cases, but she says don't start there. First, work on your gut, restoring the health there, and then that should resolve it. Sometimes people who are really having an issue do need to completely take out those oxalate-rich foods for a time while they work on fixing that underlying cause, and then they can try adding them back later. But she doesn't always like to start there with just taking it out. She likes to start with fixing the underlying problem. So that's what she says, work on the gut, and of course that's the GAPS protocol that she has laid out in her books. And of course I have a bunch of different material on that on my blog and YouTube channel, lots of other videos. And there's GAPS coaches and practitioners who can help when people need help with it. I have material with that as a certified GAPS coach as well, different ways to help people. But anyway, that is what her recommendation is. It's pretty simple, but very good, very profound, and it really does work as well. So I was also able to learn more about oxalates from Mary Reddick, and some of you already know who she is. If you don't, I'll put a link down below to her website so you can learn more about her, but she's also one of my favorite people in the health space because she has such an extraordinary story of how sick she was and her journey of recovery from that. And one of my favorite things about her is the wisdom that she brings in the mindset part of a healing journey, because that can be a really big thing, especially if you've been chronically ill for a while and you've already tried a lot of things and your spirits and optimism are just very low. She's so good at, her tips are so good at just bringing that mind shift of being a hero to overcome this, and kind of how you need to think and what you need to do, as well as of course the practical diet part of it. So that's one of my favorite things about her. But she has so much knowledge and she's studied so much about all these different aspects of health. And I got to be part of a talk with her one time, to listen to a talk, or attend it, I guess it would be called, as part of my certified GAPS coach training, where she talked about different plant toxins, including oxalates, and it was so interesting, very, very informative. She's the one who described them as little shards of glass, so they're very sharp. So one of the big things that she mentioned was eating seasonally. So if you think about it, let's take spinach for example, because it's a really good example. If you think about it, how frequently is spinach available for us to harvest fresh when it's growing and eat it? Just for a very short time in the spring, right? Maybe you can do a second planting in the fall, but again, for a pretty short amount of time. So usually just in the spring, for a short window of time, can you get spinach seasonally and eat it. And so she says oxalates will build up in the body when you're having an issue with them. And so one of the things to do is don't eat spinach every single day. Just eat it seasonally. And that goes for the rest of the oxalate-rich foods, or foods that may have a more significant amount of oxalates in them. If you're eating seasonally, that automatically takes care of like 90% of the problem. And it's a good rule of thumb, she says, even for healthy people who don't have an issue, so that you don't develop an issue too. Because even if you didn't start out with one, if you're eating a raw spinach smoothie every day, that's not good. She's seen issues with that. And so that's the first tip, just eat seasonally. And that takes care of so much of it. The next tip that she has is talking about how to not necessarily deactivate, because it's more of a physical problem with how sharp they are, but to break them down and block their absorption in the body is really what you want to do. So before we go into that too much, let's first talk about cooking techniques. So she talked about different ways that you can deal with them as far as cooking. So they're not something that can be neutralized with soaking or fermenting or something like that. If you ferment beets, for example, you're still going to have the same oxalates in that fermented beet or beet kvass. So fermenting, she says, does not do anything for them. But she says that cooking techniques can. So she says you can boil oxalate-rich foods in water and then discard the cooking water, and then that will get rid of a lot of them for you. Cooking in itself helps to get rid of some. So cooked spinach is going to have less than raw spinach, but then you can get rid of more by cooking it in water, which will then take them out, and then you can discard the cooking water, and then your cooked spinach will have a lot less too. So that's another thing that you can do. And then another thing that she recommended is eating certain things with oxalate-rich foods to help block that oxalate absorption in your body. So one of the best foods is actually high-fat dairy. So this can be butter, it can be cultured cream, it can even cheese actually helps a lot. And if you think about it traditionally, what are some really delicious ways to have spinach? It would be like in a spinach dip with some high-fat cheese, dairy type things, cream cheese, I don't remember exactly how you make that, but you get the idea. So having it paired with those things is really delicious, and there's actually wisdom behind it too. So eating that high-fat dairy with high oxalate foods helps to block that oxalate absorption. So that can be a really good key for any of us to employ, just to remember to combine those in the right way. Another example can be nuts. They can be a high oxalate food, and so if you're making like a nut butter, you'll of course want to sprout or soak or ferment your nuts for other reasons to deactivate other plant toxins. But in order to help with oxalates, making your nut butter and adding some ghee or some butter in with it as the fat, as the like oil fat portion of the recipe can really help there too. Okay, so my last tip that I learned from Mary Reddick about oxalates is kind of dealing with them when you have an issue. You have health problems, you know that you're not doing well with oxalates. How do you transition to not eating so many of them? Because there's this thing that will happen if the body stops having any oxalates in the diet at all. It will go into what's called oxalate dumping, and that's where it's getting rid of those oxalates that were built up in the body, and that will cause worse symptoms. And so you don't want dumping. You want the body to gradually be getting rid of them, so you're reducing them somewhat, pairing your high oxalate foods with the high fat dairy, using good cooking techniques, and of course all the while working on fixing the gut situation. But you don't want to just take them out completely. So she says that you start making gentle shifts in the right direction, slowly and gradually, and that's the best way to go to prevent that. And then if somebody feels like the oxalate symptoms are getting worse while you're going through this transition, like it's dumping oxalates and you're feeling them more, then she says you have to actually add more oxalates back in. And so depending on how the person is eating, that can be as easy as adding some cooked spinach or something like that. If somebody is on no plant gaps, that gets to be very tricky, and she even has solutions for that. She's really amazing. She has phenomenal experience with her own health journey and then helping other people as well. I learned so much from her. But she says that you can add something like chaga mushroom tea. So you're not eating a vegetable if you can't tolerate any vegetables at all, but it's a way to get oxalates in to stop that dumping situation. So hopefully you found that interesting as I found it. I know that I was blown away. I learned so much from her, and that's just the oxalate section. She talked about other plant toxins too and how to deal with them, but oxalates is one that people are more aware of, and the symptoms are very like in your face and can be miserable. And so that's one that comes up a lot when I'm helping people, when I'm helping clients, as a GAPS coach, or what other people run into as well, what I hear about here and there and things like that. So I thought that that was a really good video topic. Thank you again for suggesting it. Thank you guys always when you have video topic ideas. I'll have information down below. Like I said, link to Mary Reddick's website so you can learn more about her if you don't already know about her. I'll have links to Dr. Natasha's GAPS books. I'll have links to my GAPS materials and helps that I have created to help people who need, support following the protocol, because there can be a lot of questions that come up along the way. So I'll have all that down below in the description box. If you did like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with anybody else you think would find it interesting or helpful. And if you're new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. I get out new videos every week on nourishing recipes and natural living. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.